Aaron, thanks so much for joining me here on the Mark Divine Show. Super stoked to have you.
Thank you, Mark. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So you're in you said Montclair, New Jersey?
Correct. Yeah.
New Jersey. My old joke was like whenever someone said they're from New Jersey, I would say, "What exit?"
There's a few exits, but I'm also close. The train also runs through here, so you could also ask which
train stop. Yeah. Then it goes to the Path station still, right?
The one that I'm on goes directly into Penn Station.
Penn Station now.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I'm on the Montclair Booton line at the Upper Montclair train station.
Yeah, and that's Coldsville out there right now. So you've gotten some cold weather right now, and I'm out in sunny San Diego, so I always like to rub that in a little bit.
Yeah, well, it definitely works this time of year. We got super, super cold weather a couple of weeks back.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate what you're doing. It's interesting. I mentioned to you before we started that I've taken my second pass. I didn't say that at my doctorate. My first pass was at University of San Diego in leadership in 2000, but I got recalled to go to war in Iraq. And of course, war has a way to really focus your attention. And I decided at that time that, the academic path wasn't for me. I wanted to develop leaders, which is something that you have a lot of experience with at McKinsey and also through your academic work. And so I came back home and I launched my business, which has really been developing leaders using kind of Navy SEAL integrated development principles. So very different than more the academic approach, but it's been a really fascinating journey. And now I'm back getting my P.H.D. in global leadership. And so I'm learning what I thought I knew,
mm-hmm.
But the vast world of this genre of organizational behavior, leadership development, social psychology, personal psychology, how that plays into human behavior and groups and teams. And it's massive how much content and pedagogy there is, or andragogy there is around these topics. So let's kind of like go back a little bit in time. Like what got you interested in leadership and in these subjects that led to your kind of 8-year tour at Columbia University and then into consulting?
Well, I got my undergraduate degree out in Oregon, where I grew up. And I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And I ended up with a double major in business and psychology. Right. And the psychology part was the passion, and the business part was what I was going to do for a living.
Right.
And psychology, I was just fascinated. And I didn't want to go into counseling or abnormal psychology. I was fascinated at how normal people behave.
Right.
So I got totally hooked on all those weird social psychological experiments that you wouldn't ethically be able to do anymore.
Right.
The Zimbardo prison experiments, the Milgram experiments, like those things. I just was fascinated. I'm like, normal people do crazy stuff if you put them in the right environment.
Yeah.
I am fascinated by this. And I actually started even doing research back then. I remember I went and actually had lunch with Phil Zimbardo, the guy who did the Stanford prison experiments, and was just, he fascinated me. And I really got into the work of Kurt Lewin, who did just a lot of seminal work around social psychology, but also change, behavior.
He had
change.
that 3-stage change model, right? Freeze, unfreeze, refreeze.
Absolutely,
like that.
He did.
I remember Lewin's model.
One of his many, and I saw that one of his proteges was still teaching at Columbia.
Okay,
and I was like, man, if I could learn from that guy, that would be amazing. So I went to Columbia University, and Morton Deutsch was led at the time their Center for International Conflict Resolution, and he was a disciple of Kurt Lewin. And it turns out many of the other professors there were also, in their own right, gurus, and I just loved it. I loved the topics. I loved how do you help ordinary people become great leaders and rise to the moment when challenges are great and opportunities are great. And I just got sucked into group dynamics and social psychology and how people think and act, particularly in organizations and teams when you're trying to work together to do something hard or do something great. It just fascinated. It still does. It's still one of my passions.
Right. So when you went to Columbia, what was like, what were you looking for at the end of that? Were you thinking I'm going to be an academic and just doing this research all the time? Or were you
I
thinking
had
I'm going to
no
be
idea. I actually
really?
did all the things. I was like, I don't know what I want to do. So I started teaching. So while I was
Okay.
there, I was teaching a graduate course. While I was there, I was doing a ton of research and writing, and I published in non-academic as well as academic journals. I got a publication in the Journal of Applied Psychology, which in my field was like, that's one of the
That's
best
huge.
journals. So I was
Yeah,
like,
right.
I got a pub in JAP. That's awesome. And I was doing consulting on the side. And I loved the consulting work too. That was very practical and applied, and didn't care about all my theories and nerdy bookworm stuff. They just wanted to help answer their problems.
Right.
And I thought, man, is there any way I could do all of these things? And I actually realized that if I crafted my consulting career in the right way, I could do all of them, or I could have an academic career and still consult on the side. So
Right.
then the
Right.
question, then I'm like, well, if I can do all of them, which one do I want to spend more of my time doing?
Right.
And I realized I wanted to spend more of my time doing the practical applied things. That was really, if I had to pick, that was the one that got me most excited.
Yeah. Well, I think that's really why, I mean, the practitioner scholar ends up, I think, shedding more light on truth of the situation, right? Because you're getting
Exactly.
down into the weeds and you're really testing theories, and because a lot of just pure academic stuff, I found anyways, is just a little bit often just one bubble off of reality.
Yes,
You know what I
indeed.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yep, I
interesting.
felt the same way.
Yeah. So, was there anything that that you felt, because when you do a doctoral work, at least this is what I've been told, you're meant to like move the dial on knowledge, right? Introduce something new, extend a theory or create something new. What would you say was like your contribution, or like what new came out of Aaron's work, in academic circles?
Okay, I'll share from my dissertation. I had this hypothesis, this theory that because humans are cognitively limited, we only have so many cognitive resources. So this is coming from social cognition theory. That those cognitive resources need to be harnessed in a very focused and targeted way.
Right.
And the thought I had was self-awareness, which is generally a very good thing for leaders. If you were too overwhelmed with a task, with a problem to solve, perhaps too much self-awareness would interfere with your ability to actually solve a problem on a team. And there's ample evidence that being self-aware in the moment actually consumes quite a lot of resources cognitively. Like you have to think about, I need to think about myself and my strengths and my weaknesses and how I'm showing up and how I'm affecting other people. And while that's very important, it's also cognitively taxing, if you will. And so my theory was that there will be some situations where being highly self-aware will actually lead to underperformance.
That's interesting.
And I very carefully mapped out the situations where it should particularly help and where it would hurt. And my finding was it always helps. I actually refuted my own hypothesis.
Yeah. Well,
Self-awareness, when you are working with
tool.
other people on a team, self-awareness always helps.
Always more help.
No matter how cognitively taxing it might be, it is a net add to the situation. Self-awareness is a good thing.
I think that's really interesting. Again, semantics really can trip us up, because it helps to really define what we're talking about with self-awareness. So my work with Navy SEALs, I could say, okay, self-awareness has several aspects to it. One is what you're referring to is thinking about your thinking, which is rational kind of left brain cognition. Whereas it's like me training a sniper who's on the gun, who's radically focused on a target, and he has to be, just like putting an enormous amount of energy focused outward. And then there's contextual awareness, which is much more right brain and broad-based receptive awareness. And so we can train that as well. And that's more like the spotter who stands behind the sniper, who's looking, he's using a soft gaze, he's allowing information to come in, he's not thinking, he's receiving information. And that takes a lot less of a cognitive load, a lot less energy, but you're absorbing a lot of information and you're just scanning for patterns. And so we train in the SEALs, because we're all about mental development and self-awareness. We train these two capacities simultaneously. We call that simultaneous mind. And this has not, this makes you an extraordinarily effective leader, because you can be radically focused on, like the right decision, the right action, the target, while remaining aware of what's going on, even in relation to your teammates. I don't went off on a little tangent there. I'm not sure why, but
no, it's not
really
a tangent at all. I mentioned to you before when we were talking that we have a new book out, and one of the concepts in the book is dual awareness, and it's exactly this simultaneous
same
mind.
thing. Oh, that's cool.
It's exactly the same thing. And when we talk about self-awareness, we mean not just the metacognition of understanding what I'm thinking and how I'm thinking about it, also understanding how there might be potentially subconscious emotions that are sitting there that are guiding me or biasing me, that I can actually bring to awareness and actually be more choiceful about how it affects how I behave and what I look for.
That's awesome.
Being self-knowledgeable, bringing the knowledge of myself into my awareness of, oh, that's a common pitfall I fall into in these situations. I know when I go into meetings like this kind of thing often pushes my buttons and I react badly. Knowing that, how am I going to respond differently? All bringing all that, and then that situational awareness of, okay, I know what my intention is. I know what I want to do. What is the situation asking of me? And there may be things that I never imagined that would say, wait, there's an unexpected opportunity here for me to do something that I hadn't planned to do, but that would actually be a very good thing to do. And so doing those at the same time and connecting the awareness of my situation and the awareness of myself and what I'm trying to do is sort of the magic piece of leadership that it's hard to do in any case. It's especially hard to do when there's a high degree of uncertainty and the stakes are high.
That's right. Yeah. And you're hyper aroused, which pretty much everyone is when there's a lot of uncertainty, but everyone also is, because of the way our culture's evolved with the fast pace and constant triggers of social media and all the things that we take to be the tiger, which aren't the tiger. That's great. I want to come back to your book, Deliberate Calm, in a bit, but let's talk a little bit about some of the work you do at McKinsey. Now, talk about probably a pretty high performance, fast paced environment. I was at Anderson for a while before Anderson went away, not Accenture, but the original Anderson.
Yeah.
What people find surprising about me is I was a CPA and MBA before I joined the SEALs. So I went to NYU Stern for my MBA and was a certified public accountant at Coopers and Lybrand. Remember them?
I worked for Coopers and Lybrand.
Did you really? Holy shit. I was there in 1985.
In the 90s. In the 90s, I was in my P.H.D. program, but I started dabbling in consulting.
Right on.
And I was doing my own little side gig for a while. And I'm like, I think I want to work for like a real place somewhere. Yeah. And I actually started with Coopers and Lybrand right before they merged with Pricewaterhouse.
Right on.
So I was with Coopers and Lybrand for like a blink of an eye. And then I was with PwC. All the way from when the PwC formed in 98, I think, all the way through to 2003 when I joined McKinsey.
Okay. Awesome companies. Yeah. So I have a little bit of experience with those environments. And McKinsey, of course, is the granddaddy, right? What a great firm, great reputation. And I love that they do combine, like what you were talking about earlier, or support scholarly work with the practitioner work of the consultant. So what were some of the really interesting projects and insights that you gleaned working at, both from a leadership position at McKinsey as a senior partner, but also maybe in terms of the work that you're doing with clients that are on the leading edge of, organizational change and also social change? I know it's a broad-based question.
No, it's one of the things I love about my job, and it's a very demanding job, but it also gives me an incredible amount of flexibility.
Right.
If I can perform and deliver within the parameters of our values and our ethics and our professional standards, and deliver high performance, I get this incredible opportunity to do almost anything I can dream of, which is just great. So one of the
they have
things
no problem with you writing this book and doing these podcasts.
No, they supported the book. Some colleagues of mine and I who are like-minded have created a sort of organizational science, behavioral science unit that basically is a mini think tank that does research on these topics. We as long as we're delivering performance and impact for our clients, we get just tremendous amount of flexibility, which I love. It allows me to do research and write and explore, and a lot of it is I do in the context with clients, and say, hey, I've never tried this exactly this way before, but I think this would work. Let's try it. And once you've delivered for clients and they trust you, they're often willing to go on and do some courageous things. And it's just been incredible, some of the things we've been able to do to turn businesses around, to turn teams around, to see, one of the things I get excited about is this idea that we can help companies make more money and be more profitable while also helping leaders be better people, better humans. And it's a win-win for everybody. They can contribute better to society and to the communities in which they operate. They can be more inspiring and supportive to their employees. They can, and still do so in a way that makes good sense as a business.
Yeah. There's two kind of major themes that are affecting business and culture. And one is, this area of operating in a VUCA environment, right? Which is near and dear to kind of what you wrote or why you wrote your book. Volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. A term that we're very familiar with in the sales now is pretty common in the business world. And then closely related is the more recent, experience with COVID and the lockdowns and the Great Resignation and the difficulty now that both sides of the employers are having attracting and retaining, high quality talent. And then on the employee side, just a lot of change in terms of how people view work, what's important, job for job's sake and money for money's sake is lost its appeal. And, wanting to work for companies that really have a strong why and social impact. I mean, all this has happened so quickly. So what are the biggest challenges that leaders face, and what are like some of the things that you're seeing that are leading to success or to better results?
Yeah.
As opposed to, trying to do things the same way and expecting different results.
Well, I have a strong belief that what we saw in COVID that seems to have changed everything didn't actually change everything. It just accelerated changes that were already underway.
Okay.
I think there were a bunch of changes that were right under the surface and were going to happen soon anyway.
Right.
Such as unleashed. Yeah. Well, let me go back in history a little bit and put this in some historical perspective. If you go back far enough, pre-industrial revolution, what you find is, work was very different. There wasn't like a 9 to 5. I mean, most people worked in agriculture in the fields, or they worked in artisanal shops. There was not much of a middle class. People were either in upper class or were really just scraping to get by. And then we have this industrial revolution, which is, happened in the 1600s and 1700s, where we start to automate things, and we start to be able to have machinery, and we start to be able to have steam engines, and we start to be able to say, oh, we can work differently, and it's much more productive. And there are some tremendous benefits of that, right? Which is creating a middle class, creating wealth, creating a better lifestyle and standard of living. On the other hand, it also changed the nature of work. It said, as people move from the fields to the factories, suddenly the way to do that is we need to really standardize work. We need specialization of labor. We need most people to not really think or have a craft, just come in and make this widget the same way every time, pound this nail into this hole the same way every time. The assembly line mentality of work really became the dominant way. It's like, we only need a few people to think.
Right.
In fact, that gave rise to the modern structure of the hierarchy, which is, well, why would I come in and just work for someone else instead of, farm my own field? Well, because you'll make more money. That's why.
Right.
Well, okay. So it's a safer work environment and I make more money, but now it's a transaction. So the transaction is I will get a stable, guaranteed amount of money in a safe work environment if I come in and do what I'm told and make 10 widgets an hour. That's my quota.
Right.
I make 10 widgets an hour, 10 hours a day. Now, in the early days, they were like, oh, and we can turn lights on and we can work people 14 or 15 or 18 hours a day. Mm-hmm. And at some point, there was a bit of a revolt. But, this whole idea of a 5-day work week, 40-hour work week, I mean, that evolved as part of the Industrial Revolution.
Right. And affected our academic situation. I mean, all academics,
everything,
labor unions,
that
everything
just became, and now for generations, that's how we've all operated that's how work gets done. And everybody has a boss and the boss tells you what to do. And, we try to standardize work and we have a standard work week. That's been kind of starting to deteriorate though for a while.
Interesting.
People are like, oh, we always have to come into the office and do work. It's like, actually, pre-pandemic, a lot of people were working a little bit from home here and there because they could. You go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. It's like, why do I have to go to the office to work? It's like, well, that's where all the files are in the file cabinets at the office. If somebody calls me on my business phone, it's going to ring in the office.
Right.
If I want to have a meeting, it's at the office. If I need somebody to type something up on letterhead, it's at the office. Well, we haven't had to do that for a couple of decades. We've had the ability to work from home for decades. We just keep coming in because that's a long-standing norm. It's just a norm. A lot of these norms were just in place. We have a 5-day work week. Why? I mean, nobody questions why. It's just, well, that's just how it is. That's just how it works. You work Monday to Friday, and then you get the weekend off.
Right.
Well, that's a little bit like, but why? The reasons why don't really apply anymore.
It's just
and haven't for 10 or 20 years. Right. So now the pandemic comes on. We also have tremendous generational differences.
Right.
If you ask, and by the way, there's a survey that asks kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? So you can imagine for decades, the answers were things like police officer, astronaut, doctor, lawyer. Well, actually in China, the answer is still astronaut. But in the United States and most developed Western countries, the answer has changed. You want to know what the answer is now?
The number one, you mean?
Number one. What do you want to be when you grow up? Ask a kid now, what do you think they want to be?
Professional athlete, maybe?
Nope.
No. It's a good question.
Influencer.
I was going to say influencer. Yeah, they're closely related. Wow.
Influencer, YouTuber.
What was that? Even
creator.
10 years ago, you didn't even know what that was.
No, you didn't even know what that was. And the fascinating thing is if you ask, well, tell me who your boss is. They'd be like, I don't have a boss. Who's your employer? Oh, I don't have an employer. When do you work? Whenever I want.
Wow.
And the interesting thing is it turns some things on their head. Like one of the things they like about it, I'm not sure this is a good thing, but they get instant feedback.
Right.
Like it's not like I have to wait till the end of the year to get my performance evaluation. I can see how many likes I got right now. I can see how many followers I have right now. I mean, it's a whole different mindset. Now, that tipping point of what do you want to be when you grow up happened pre-pandemic.
Interesting.
Of I want more flexibility. I want to be my own boss. Where do you work? When you go into the office? Well, wherever I want. Yeah. If I'm an influencer or TikToker or YouTuber and that's my job, and I'm not saying, like, by the way, I don't agree that that's a good job. I'm still of the old generation who thinks that's not
like not
job.
Everyone can do that, right? There's not, and
but not everyone
will
can
be
do
successful
that.
at it. Yeah.
But the fact that that's considered not only a legitimate job, like because I have teenage kids, and they first told me they might want to be that when they grow up, and I told them, you might guess what. A 50-year-old professional would say. I'm like, kids, that is not a real job.
Right.
And my kids are like, well, it might not be a realistic job, but Dad, it is a real job. And now I'm like, oh, it not only is it a real job, it's a desirable job. So this is what's changing. Right. What people see as desirable for a career in the next generation, Gen Z and beyond, has shifted.
Yeah.
And
And
I don't
it's
think
not,
it's
and you can expand influencer to like the entire digital ecosystem, which is growing, especially, you know, with the metaverse and whatnot. And people now, like there's a whole, like, I don't know how many people in Korea who make money playing a video game.
exactly.
And then
Who make,
they make a
now
good
there's
living
people
playing
who
a
make
video game.
money like designing clothes that are virtual clothes.
Virtual clothes.
Like, I'm going to design you a custom skin in Minecraft, and you're going to pay me?
Right.
Like, what?
Right.
What is a custom skin in Minecraft? I don't even know what that is. But
The
people
impact
do
of
that
this, by
for a
the way,
living.
is profound, right? Because like, you know, we're up in, we just had a townhome up in Lake Placid, which is, you know where that is, upstate
Yep,
New York.
I do.
And we've been there my family's been there for years. And, you know, we had a little blow up, right, with, you know, leaking from above and, you know, big problems. And so we're like, okay, we got to get the plumber in there. We're like, there's no plumber. Like, they can't find anyone to be a
We
plumber
still need
anymore.
plumbers. We
Nobody's
still need
applying for the plumber
plumbers.
jobs, right? And like all these jobs which used to be appealing, the trades, they can't fill because this younger generation is
Well, I think but this is where I think things have shifted. I think we could fill them if we reimagined the job.
Yeah, you're right.
I think too many of the traditional jobs that still need people to do the work have been created in such a traditional way that people don't want it. So all these trends of you can work from home, but we don't. We have a 5-day work week, but the reasons why may not apply anymore.
Right.
We have a traditional hierarchy in most companies. I'll give you one other example. In most companies, it would be unheard of for a person to make more money than their boss.
Right.
Just unheard of. Not like rare or unusual, but absolutely unheard of.
Maybe in sales.
Maybe in sales.
Yeah.
Maybe in sales. That would be the one exception would be there's a few exceptions in some financial investment gigs, in some sales gigs, where what you earn is much more variabilized.
Right.
That your bonus might then put you over. But when you step back and you're like, why is that? Most of the reasons go back to an old way of thinking about how organizations work that go back to the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
But the level of automation that's happening now means that most of the jobs of the future are not going to be of the routine, build me 20 widgets an hour because that's the quota. I can see your work. I can see if you're productive. I can see if you're doing a good job. It's like, if you're doing knowledge work that I can't have AI do because it requires emotion or judgment or creativity or humanity, and it's really work that a person should do, how would I know if you're doing a good job?
Right.
And why would it matter if you work 40 hours a week or 30 hours a week or 50 hours a week? Why would I care? There's a few places where you see this, where there've been almost forced natural experiments. Well, you're in California. Hollywood would be a good one.
Right.
You know, at one point, due to a combination of antitrust and monopoly busting and, breaking up of the old studio system, right around the time that unions formed across not just actors, but directors and writers, suddenly you had a very different ecosystem that at the time everybody said, well, this will never work. You mean I don't control all these acts? They are part of a guild,
right,
and they get to go from gig to gig? Like, that's crazy. That's never going to work. And actually, over time, I would argue it made things better.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't pay a star actor by the hour. Right? You wouldn't say, I'm going to pay you more if we do 10 takes instead of 5. Right. I'm going to pay you twice as much.
Interesting. Yeah.
In fact, I'd rather have 5 takes than 10, to be honest. In fact, I'd rather have 1 take. Why would I want to pay an actor more the more time they work? Actually, but that's how we treat it. For a lot of people, it's like you're a coder, let's say. Let's say you code in Python or some language that is in demand. The old way of doing it would be like, I'll pay you by how many lines of code you write. Well, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
Or how many hours you work. It's like, if I can deliver you the features and functionality you want with less code and fewer hours, why would you pay me less?
Right. It's probably better.
It's probably better. It's simpler.
Right.
It's better. But the way we work today is, and you saw this during COVID, you have all these managers going, we got to get people back into the office to make sure they're productive. I'm like, how do you know? Just because they're in the office, how do you know they're productive?
Right.
Well,
and
I can see them
there's a
working.
good argument that there's a lot of productivity killers in the office.
There's a lot of productivity. Now, by the way, I'm a big believer in having in-person connectivity.
Of course.
I don't think everybody being virtual and remote all the time is a good idea.
No.
But I also think some of the reasons why some managers and leaders wanted people back in the office were the wrong reasons.
I agree. Yeah.
If somebody, I remember somebody said, well, the utilization of our office space has gone to just such low points. It used to be 100%. I was like, your office utilization used to be 100%? Well, close to it. I'm like, really? You would have people at 2 a.m. on a Saturday? No, not then. That's off hours. I'm like, off hours? So you're predefining the hours based on the hours that you set, which is what? 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Right. Well, why are those the hours?
Right.
People work on weekends sometimes.
Yeah. Some coders probably work better at night.
They might work better at night. In fact, there is some evidence that there's now 3 peaks of work: before lunch, after work, and after dinner.
Yeah.
And that third peak for some people is really productive.
Right.
And there's a lot of benefits to adding more flexibility. But let's imagine, I invited this CEO to imagine, I said, let's imagine you gave someone some hard work and some deliverables and some output they needed to produce. Let's imagine they produced it and did all the things you asked and more by, say, 4 p.m. on a Wednesday. What do you want them to do on Thursday? Well, they should be working. Doing what? Joining meetings they don't need to be at, sending emails they don't need to send, launching initiatives that are duplicative of other initiatives that already, like, what do you want them to do?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you just want to give them busy work to just be in the office and be busy, I'm not sure that's value add. It might even be value destroying.
Kill morale. Yeah, exactly.
So, these are these mind shifts that I think were kind of percolating under the surface pre-pandemic.
Right.
And the pandemic just really shifted it. And people said, I'm not sure there is a reason to be in the office Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
Why Monday through Friday?
It also, wasn't it exacerbated by just, let me relate this to an article you wrote with the interviewing the military lieutenant colonel who was saying it's very similar. COVID and kind of trying to re-enter the workforce is very similar to a military member coming back from multiple deployments where, at first they're all excited and then they're like, they lose the bubble because they're like, things aren't the same. They have a lot of stress they haven't dealt with. There's, conflict. So we're also dealing with that, right? I agree with you. This kind of long arc bubbling under the surface, we have to change the story about work, and this accelerated it. But then you would layer on top of that this sense of like people dealing with basically post-traumatic stress.
Yeah, and
returning to the workforce and really just jacked up.
Exactly, and I would say a lot of unresolved grief.
Yes, indeed.
And people think of grief as when a close loved one dies. That's when you grieve. But actually, grieving is a process we go through psychologically whenever we feel a sense of loss of something loved or cherished.
Yeah, like a cherished idea about work.
It could be a pet.
Right.
It could be an experience. It could be my favorite restaurant closed that I felt an emotional connection to, and I loved and cherished having coffee at that place, and that place doesn't exist anymore. So grief can be the loss of any kind of loved or cherished things. And a lot of the loved or cherished things we might not have even been conscious that we had.
Yeah.
And so many things after the pandemic were gone, or the experience of it was gone. Because now even when people go back to the office, it's not the same.
Not the same.
Yes, I can go back to the office, but all the people aren't always there anymore. That running into people in the hallway, I don't run into all the same people because they're not there the same day I'm there.
Yeah, some people are wearing masks, other aren't. Some people are
are
zooming
wearing
into the
masks.
meeting, and you got 3 people in person and 7 people on Zoom. Everything's kind of strange.
And
right?
I think some of the grief that people are experiencing, they can't even quite put a name on it, a finger on it.
Right.
And when we were talking, the military veteran you mentioned, when we were talking, I had written an article about grief, and she and about resignation and a bunch of stuff, and she had actually called me, and we turned it into an article together because she had such fascinating thoughts on when she said, when I came back from deployment the first time, I didn't understand why they were sitting me down and giving me a talk.
Right.
And then by the third time, I was like, now I understand why I need this talk, because things are different in ways that I can't put a finger on why I miss the old thing. It's not objectively better, but somehow yes, we have a new couch and it's a better couch, but I kind of and so many things just are feeling off. And I think COVID did that to just about everybody. There's something unsettling about having everything have changed for me all at once. And I can't tell what I'm missing about the old, but I'm missing something about what we're losing from what was pre-pandemic.
Yeah. So this is probably a good place to talk about your book, Deliberate Calm, because I think it addresses like one of the things that how we can kind of address this confluence of this major cultural societal change that's been going on as we move out of the information age into the conceptual age or exponential age or whatever it's ultimately going to be called. And then as we kind of renorm ourselves after COVID and try to re-enter our relationship to work, how does what did you discover in Deliberate Calm that can help leaders kind of lean into this?
Well, I'll share one quick experience I had that planted a seed for some of this for me. And really 2 personal experiences, one professional and one personal. The professional experience I had was in December of 2019. Some colleagues of mine at McKinsey organized a group of clients, and it's called the Resilience Advisory Council, and it's a group of people that talk about how to build more resilient organizations. A lot of them were financial institution executives, and I believe they started it after the financial crisis around 2008, 2009. And I was asked to present on effective decision making in order to be more resilient and in times of uncertainty. And another presenter was there, Harvard professor Dutch Leonard. And we got to talking because one of the things he said when he was presenting that I found fascinating was he said, when there's a crisis or a big issue and you need resilience, you really need to differentiate between 2 types of crises. One is what he called a routine emergency, where it is a crisis. There is a lot at stake, but it's something we've experienced before, trained for. There are unknowns, but they're sort of known unknowns, if you will. Right. And he said, so if you have a firefighters going to fight a fire, there's a lot of risk, there's a lot of danger. But if there's no real X factor about the fire, they know what they're dealing with and they've trained for this. Yeah. And that's a routine emergency. He said there's other types of crises that have major uncertainties where the amount that you don't know what you don't know is so huge and constantly shifting that the way you tend to react might easily fall back into some patterns that are ultimately disastrous.
Right.
And trying to bounce back to known methods and routines might be exactly the wrong thing to do. Right. And it got me thinking about some of my own experiences. I went through a personal crisis of my own. My first wife was an addict and an alcoholic, and hid it very well for years. And I couldn't figure out why I was so successful professionally and personally. My life was falling apart. My marriage was falling apart. I was like, I need to get a divorce. On some level, I was relieved when I was like, oh, she has an addiction. And that's okay. We can do something about that. But I couldn't really do anything about it because she didn't ultimately want to get help.
Mm.
And I reacted very badly to that situation. The being out of control of something that I really wanted to control and fix led me to react in ways that were ultimately, at best, not helpful, and at worst, self-destructive.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, I started thinking, I was in a crisis of uncertainty personally. Boy, it's really easy in those crises to fall back on things that have served you well in the past in completely different situations where it doesn't apply anymore.
Right.
And I noticed once I made that connection, how often I see leaders in a business environment experiencing a crisis of uncertainty, a new situation, and they double down on the thing they know how to do when it's exactly the wrong thing.
Interesting.
And you see this sometimes with professional athletes where the rules of the game haven't changed, you're prepared, and the instinct of you just double faulted in tennis or you just threw an interception, you should forget that mistake and just move on with what you know. Maybe take one small learning of, but really it's calm down. You made a judgment mistake because you didn't follow what you know. Go back to what you know. Calm down and go back to what you know. There's other situations where the calm down part is still true, but not the go back to what you know.
Right.
That nagging doubt, that nagging question that you should ignore in one situation because the rules of the game haven't changed. In other situation, that nagging doubt you should actually really bring to the forefront and not put it aside and say, maybe I need to say, wait, maybe I need to behave very differently here and explore a completely different way of thinking about this, approaching this.
Right.
And that can make all the difference. And it's no longer obvious and clear when we are in a new situation or not. There's so much disruptive technology. There's so many VUCA situations where something starts out looking like, oh, I know that threat. I know that opportunity. And as you get into it, you're like, whoa, this is a little bit different than anything I've ever experienced. Maybe it's time to not just rely on the things I've always done that have worked in the past.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating because, as you're talking, of course, I'm reverting back to my Navy SEAL training, and we had very similar thinking. We had, there was a routine crisis. My chair just dropped a few feet. We had routine crisis, and we had what we called standard operating procedures, and we drilled those SOPs relentlessly. So when that routine crisis happened, we knew what to do. And then you had the non-routine crisis, right? And what we learned and why we started talking about VUCA, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, 20 years ago is because we learned that in combat, you have the non-routine crisis occur repeatedly and also sometimes fast, like right on top of each other. And so you really don't have time to get back into your flow or a rhythm of how to do things. And so you need to really think very differently. And so we tried to set up conditions for chaos and constant change. So you couldn't rely on the known knowns or even the known unknowns, like you said. You had to get out of the box and come up with radically new solutions. So this is what you're saying we need to teach.
That's what I'm and the other thing I'm saying is in for most people who weren't in the military or who weren't astronauts or who weren't in some of these,
right?
For most of them, that situation where you go from a crisis of uncertainty to another crisis of uncertainty was unusual. Like
That's right.
50 years ago, that was rare.
Right.
Most of the things were not one thing after another. Most of the things were reasonably predictable.
Right.
And now I think more the norm is uncertainty, or at least we don't know yet if this is one of those uncertain things. It's just no longer, the pace of change is so fast. The amount of disruption is so coming so fast, not just technologically, but political instability,
right?
Global supply chain crises. The world has become so interconnected that one small thing somewhere can have surprising effects 5 steps removed in ways we hadn't imagined.
Right.
And that is now creating a world where something that maybe used to be isolated to a need of Navy SEALs in combat situations is now a lot like what a business executive faces on a almost week-to-week basis.
Right. Well, I love the title of your book, Deliberate Calm, because, we say in the SEALs, the first thing you need to do is pause and breathe.
Bingo.
And then think, right? And even thinking, we use the OODA loop. Like, you got to change the way you think and make your thinking a process where you're observing and reorienting constantly. And then you take your action.
Exactly.
And then action is also not the main, you don't like create a 3-page plan or a 10-page plan. You just like back in the, let's go try something. Fast twitch iteration is what we call it.
Big fan of the OODA loop.
Yeah. Yes. So do you get into some of those strategies in the book, or give us the before we wrap up, kind of like 10,000.
Some colleagues of mine and I built a whole training program around leadership that includes a whole module on the OODA loop. It's not. I don't think we hit it in the book. In the book, we don't specifically call out the OODA loop as a way to orient and make fast twitch decisions, but we do call out the pause, breathe, orient.
Nice.
You need to match the situational awareness with the self-awareness,
right,
in a way that's different than you do in a normal standard kind of situation.
Awesome.
And you need to be aware not only of your current thoughts, patterns, biases, but also your tendencies in a crisis. When you are stressed, how do you tend to react? And does that serve you? And is it appropriate here? And sometimes it is. Right. Sometimes the quick reaction is exactly what you should do. In many cases, it is not.
Right. I agree with that. Fascinating.
One of the people who read the book, and I was eagerly awaiting some of the online feedback and to say, did we get 5 stars or do we get 2 stars? One of the early ones gave us a quite glowing review, but what she said was, if I'm remembering this one, it was one of the first reviews on Amazon, I think. And the reader said, I would recommend starting with the appendix. Because in the appendix, we actually have here's how to day by day just put it into practice rather than reading about it, just do it. Here's a week by week, day by day kind of go do it.
Prescription. Yeah.
Prescription.
Yeah.
And
that could have been a follow-on book, by the way. You missed an opportunity.
I know. I should have split it into 2 books.
Right.
But I thought that, I can see how that would resonate rather than just read about it. Because we reference some of the theory and the neuroscience behind how the brain works. And this person was like, that's all great and interesting. But the biggest benefit was actually in the appendix of actually just doing it, putting it into practice. Takeaways. Some of it's basic, like, just breathe. Take a pause, a 6-second pause.
Yeah.
And I know 6 seconds might seem like a long time, but it's not that long. A 6-second pause where you breathe, take a deep breath, take a step back from whatever the issue or problem is, can give your brain time to reset.
Yeah. And it's almost like a forced mindfulness practice. I mean, the practice of mindfulness is, over time, when done effectively, creates that capacity for that space and that separation where you can, kind of watch your thoughts and emotional reactions as they arise without engaging in them, without letting them take you. So by just pausing and taking a deep breath, you're kind of forcing that and giving yourself the opportunity to say, okay, wait, what's happening here?
And yet I feel like technology has done 2 things that together go exactly against that, even though that's what makes it needed even more. So one is, as technology deals with the more routine things, the things left for humans to do are inherently more non-routine and more judgment-based and more creative. Mm-hmm. So being able to be on autopilot is less and less a luxury because all the autopilot stuff now machines are doing.
Right.
And technology has enabled this always on, always texting, emailing, Slacking, video at any point. I can call a meeting right now and we can just have it. And it's just this rapid fire, frenetic pace that's creating almost this technology induced ADD,
Yeah.
where we're just jumping from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And the combination of that, I think, makes it even more important and yet harder for people to just pause and take a break.
Right.
I have my EA just say, you got to find time every day where you just put breaks in.
Right.
I just need just break for what? Nothing. Like literally where I can just not do anything and just.
And there's neuroscience behind that too.
Mm-hmm.
So anytime
Absolutely.
you do something that is really engaging and requiring a ton of energy and you're learning and presenting, if you don't take time for your mind to just stop and process, then it's going to have to do it at night. Right. And so then you're going to end up, spending a ton of energy while you're sleeping.
And people are increasingly sleep deprived.
That's right. And they're sleep deprived. So they're not processing, and they miss major insights that could shift perspective on things or be like, oh, that aha, that's what I learned.
Exactly. That's exactly what we found in the research, but also in practice. So, trying some of these things with clients, they self-reported that, wow, when I put these in practice, I felt more creative, more productive. We also, in one case, asked the people who were working with the people going through this program to report if they noticed a difference, and they also noticed a difference.
Oh, cool.
And the program was like about 30 minutes a week for a couple months of just these little tools and tricks.
Yeah, a few minutes a day in there.
And it made a tremendous difference in people's reported well-being, ability to show empathy and compassion, ability to be creative, ability to be an effective leader. But again, it's so easy to fall into a pattern of not getting enough sleep, not taking any breaks, jumping from one thing to another, not pausing, not realizing that the situation calls for something different than what I know how to do. And that if I use my normal playbook of what's worked for me in the past, it's likely to be a suboptimal outcome. And in many cases, we don't even realize it. We just do what we always do and then are looking around for who to blame for why it didn't work.
like Einstein's quote I love that. I keep trying to solve problems from the same paradigm that created it. Doesn't work.
Exactly.
Or expecting different results. Deliberate Calm, How to Learn and Lead in Volatile World. Did you do the audiobook? Did you read the audiobook?
I did not. We hired hired someone to read it. And I think that was better. I'm not sure. I'm not sure my voice was as calming as the one we picked.
That's great. I've gotten into listening to audiobooks only because it's easier you can squeeze it in, in the car. It's hard to read.
I actually read an excerpt, and I asked my 16-year-old daughter to listen to my version and then two of the voice actors. And my daughter was like, Dad, there's a clear rank order of this, and you're number 3. Like,
that's awesome.
So we actually did end up going with her recommendation.
Oh, that's terrific. All right. Well, Aaron, thanks so much for your time. This has been a fascinating conversation. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to reading the book. I wish I had before this call, but we're all busy and it didn't happen. So I'm going to go order it now.
That's right. You can do it now. Great. Well, wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We are.